Welcome, or ready, you are welcome for panel 2. My name is Liz Fox. I am one of our doctoral students here at UW-Milwaukee, UW-Milwaukee rather. I study with Dr. Metboue, and I'm going to be our moderator for today's panel. We've got 3 cool papers. First is going to be Fatima Zahra Ouhmaida. Then we're going to have Ghita Metboue, and then we're going to have Mihai Burlacu. So in interest of getting us started as fast as possible, I'm going to kick things over to Fatima just as soon as I remind everybody of the format. So we've got 15 minutes per talk. We're asking you to please hold your questions until the very end of the whole panel. So that's after all 3 speakers have gone. And then we're going to have 15 minutes of discussion for the entire panel that we've just seen speak. I'm also going to be unmuting to give the panelists a 5-minute warning when they're 5 minutes from the end. So if I do that, that's what's happening. Okay, I'm super excited. Let's get it started. Fatima, please take us away. Introduce yourself a little bit. Oh, that's right. I said I was going to read your bio. Just kidding. I'm going to introduce you a little bit. Pardon. So she's a Moroccan master's student in language, communication, and society. Her current study examines how artificial tools such as ChatGPT.
Please, Miss, there is a mistake. Like when you.
Oh no, I can't hear it all. You're breaking up a bunch.
You're about to just put. There is a misleading between me and her.
Liz, do you hear me?
No, I can't hear anything.
Can you
What about me?
hear me?
Okay, perfect. So the thing is, this is Fatima Zahra. Liz, you were introducing her sister, Kawsar. This is Fatima Zahra. So you need to read another bio. They're sisters, hence the confusion.
Yes, my sister in master's. I'm in the beach.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was reading the wrong part of the website. I'm also having some AV problems. I finally managed to hear that one sentence and I couldn't hear the rest of it. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? I apologize about that. And let me see if I can resolve the issue on my end by restarting here. I'm so sorry.
That's fine.
Please take us away.
Okay, so my name is Fatima Zahra Ouhmaida. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Sidi Mohammed bin Abdullah in Fes. And I'm working on the artificial intelligence and human interactions. So basically, my study gonna be comparative study between universities here in Ghourdou. Am I audible? Am I audible now? Okay, so I was saying that I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Sidi Mohammed bin Abdullah Fes, and I'm working on a thesis paper. It's all about the how do artificial intelligence interact with the human. It's machine and artificial intelligence, so it's gonna be comparative study between universities abroad and universities in Morocco to just see to test students co-authoring artificial intelligence while writing their papers. Can't you hear me? Okay. So I will now share the screen. And before I start, of course, I would really like to just thank Thank you, Professor, and thank the Digital Cultures Collaboratory at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee for giving me this opportunity to just be part of the symposium. And of course, I thank Professor Aziz Bakali for giving me and nominating me about this. And I won't forget the team behind the scenes to just make this event happen. So let me just share the screen. Yes. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can now.
Okay. So my presentation entitled The Accelerated Translator, Digital Rhythms of Moroccan PhD Students, Co-writing with ChatGPT by Professor Tayeb Ghourdou and I. So here is the outline that I'm gonna follow. Nowadays, artificial intelligence, it's increasingly shaped by the tools such as ChatGPT. And however, this transformation cannot be understood only as a technical shift. Also in the Moroccan context, if we can see the academic writing, it's really deeply multilingual. Students often think in Arabic and French, but they are required to just write and publish in English. So this means that writing is not simply about producing knowledge, it is about constantly translating ideas across languages. And of course, once again, this translation process is often slow, it can be demanding and time consuming. So here is my research problem. The core problem of this study lies to the gap between the increasing use of artificial intelligence tools and the limited understanding of their deeper impact. So, like PhD students face a specific, because they are the case study, so they face a specific challenges. They must translate their research into English while adapting to international academic standards. And this process is not only slow, but also emotionally and intellectually demanding. So while ChatGPT is widely used, like most research focuses only on its ethical benefits, such as grammar correction, maybe productivity. And what is missing here is an understanding of how AI actually changes the experience of writing itself, and especially in terms of time and identity. So my research gap is gonna lead to the research gap. It's like there is existing research on AI in the academic writing tends to focus on performance and the efficiency, uh, often in a Western context. But however, there is a clear gap when it comes to the multilingual. If we can just talk about the global South contexts. So more importantly here, that like very little attention has been given to the temporal dimensions of writing. So that is how AI reshapes the rhythm, the experience, the academic work as well. And AI is usually seen as a tool, but not as something that transforms time itself. So this study addresses that gap by introducing a new way of understanding AI as both a linguistic and temporal mediator. So this may lead to my main research questions that I have focused on. First, how does Q-writing with ChatGPT reshape the temporal experience and the academic writing rhythms of Moroccan PhD students? Second, in what ways does ChatGPT function as a linguistic and intellectual mediator, and how does this may affect students' sense of voice, identity, and the academic belonging? So to answer these questions, this study adopts a quantitative method to better understand, and a structured questionnaire was used to collect numerical data about the student experiences with the ChatGPT. And this method allows me to just identify the patterns, levels of agreements, and in general, like how AI is used in academic writing. Now, moving on to my participants, the study involved 50 Moroccan students from different academic disciplines, and all participants are multilingual, like using Arabic, French, and English in their academic work. So most of them are in early stages of their PhD, which makes them particularly engaged with digital tools to support, of course, their writing. Now moving to the key findings. The key findings can be organized into 5 main themes, like ChatGPT as a linguistic mediator and its role in the accelerated writing, also the emergence of human AI co-writing, and also the tension relations to identity and voice, and finally, its function as a survival strategy. So this slide will show better to identify the key themes, and I wanted to support these findings with quantitative data from the questionnaire. So as we can see in this graph, a large majority of participants, they reported around, if we just say 92% of students, they agree that ChatGPT helps them with translation, and which clearly confirm its role as a linguistic mediator. And also by 88% report improved writing speed, and which clearly reflect the idea of acceleration and changing writing rhythms. We can also see that 85% of students, they believe it enhanced clarity, and also over 80% say it's improves supports the idea generation, and showing that ChatGPT is not only correcting, if we can say, the language, but actively contributing to the writing process. So what is particularly interesting is that 76% of participants consider essential for writing, which suggests that ChatGPT is no longer just a tool, but something that students rely on to function academically. So this data strongly support the idea that is the main of this study, that ChatGPT plays a central role in reshaping the academic writing practices, especially in a multilingual context. So now, talking about the discussions, the findings shows that ChatGPT operates at intersection of language, of course, time and identity, and it does not simply make writing easier. It's transform how writing is experienced, and also writing becomes faster, more interactive, and more continuous in creating what I described as digital rhythms. So this supports the data that AI is not just a tool, but of course a temporal and relational force in the academic life. Of course, each study has limitations. So the sample size is relatively small and limited to one university, of course, which is Sidi Mohammed bin Abdillah, and which may affect generalizability. Also, the data are based on self-reported responses. If we can just do a mixed method approach, to better understand, and which may introduce, of course, some bias. And finally, the study captures the experience at the single moment in time and does not account for long-term changes. So to conclude, ChatGPT is not just, if we can say, accelerating writing. Um, it's accelerating access to academic participation as well, and this is shifts writing from a slow individual activity into a fast relational process and shaped by human AI interactions. Although the study focuses on Moroccan PhD students, and it reflects a broader inequalities in global academia, where language and time shape who can participate and who cannot. And so we can just make it for further research. So here are some of the references that I have used, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Fatima. I didn't interrupt you because you just hit your 10-minute mark right at your conclusion. Thank you so much. That was lovely. What I suggest folks do is take a moment to reflect and jot down any questions you might have while we prep for our next speaker.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's do it. So next up, we've got Ghita Metboue. And Ghita, if the website is not wrong this time, is a Moroccan PhD candidate, pardon, and part-time English university lecturer. She's pursuing her doctorate under the supervision of Professor El-Bakali. Her dissertation, titled The Moroccan Cultural Flow of Digital Diplomacy in Post-Human Media, I have a feeling has something to do with her presentation today. Her research situates Morocco within broader debates on digitalization, post-human media ecologies, algorithmic governance, and temporal dynamics of digital communication. I'm super excited. Ghita, go ahead and take us away.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, everyone. Again, thank you for this opportunity. It really means a lot. Of course, thanks to my supervisor. He was the one to motivate me to do this. I'm not really the type to do this. I'm more of a researcher. I write, I don't present, but here I am. So I hope I'm audible enough. Otherwise, I can just share my screen and turn off my camera, just in case. Okay. Perfect. So, can you see my screen? No. Okay. I think now you can, right? Perfect. Okay, so everyone, my presentation or my study titled The Chronopolitics of Connection, Digital Temporalities, Cultural Diplomacy, and the Reconfiguration of Human Technological Relations is a study technically inspired by my PhD dissertation. As Liz just mentioned, it's related to the Moroccan flow of digital diplomacy in post-human media. So to briefly introduce the topic and to mention the background, this presentation examines what can be understood as chronopolitics of connection, a framework that places temporality at the center of how digital technologies reshape human experiences, social relations, and cultural diplomacy, rather than viewing digital platforms as neutral tools of communications. This study highlights how they actively produce temporal regimes defined by speed, immediacy, visibility, and constant responsiveness. So, from real-time diplomatic exchanges on platforms, on social media platforms, to the rapid circulation of cultural narratives through viral content, digital environments compress time and amplifying presence in an unprecedented ways. And building on this, the presentation explores how these accelerated temporalities reconfigure recognitive processes such as attention, memory, intensify affective states, including anxiety and intimacy, and reshapes modes of participation within network publics. Moving quickly to the research rationale. So the study is grounded in the recognition that much of the existing scholarship continues to approach digital platforms as neutral tools of communication, thereby overlooking how they actively structure regimes of time through mechanisms of immediacy, visibility, and consent responsiveness. This gap calls for a more integrated interdisciplinary approach capable of capturing the complex co-constitution of human and technologies. In particular, there is a person need to systematically examine how these accelerated temporal regimes reconfigure cognitive processes, as the one that I have just mentioned. So, at the same time, the role of cultural diplomacy within these platformized and time-sensitive environments remain underexplored, and hence, I'm trying to study it. Well, moving to the research question or to the main research question of this study is how do digital temporalities shape the reconfiguration of human technological relations and the practice of cultural digital diplomacy in platformized environments? I do confess that this study is very interdisciplinary. It gathers different disciplines from cultural studies, international relations, to political sciences, to a little bit of psychology, and this is why this study is mainly theoretically is a main theoretical framework. Moving to the theoretical frameworks and the key ideas related. So, for this study, is grounded in an interdisciplinary synthesis of key theories that collectively explain how temporality, power, technology, and culture intersect within digital environments. At its core, the analysis draws on theory of social acceleration, coined by Rosa, which argues that modern societies are defined by the systematic acceleration of technological change, social practice, and the pace of life, producing a condition in which individuals experience time as increasingly compressed and stable. This is also complemented by Castell's concept of timeless time, which emphasizes that network societies recognize temporality through digital flows that disrupt sequential, linear understandings of time and replace them with simultaneity, immediacy, and constant connectivity. These temporal dynamics are further understood as mechanisms of power through Foucault's concept of governmentality, which advances the logic that modern power operates not through direct coercion, but through subtle systems that shape conduct, behavior, and subjectivity. In digital environments, this logic is extended by Terlin Gillespie, who shows how platforms act as tools of visibility by governing what is seen, amplified, or suppressed. Also advanced by butchers who claim that algorithmic systems shape user behavior without explicit infrastructures. Moving quickly to another key theoretical framework, which is related to the post-human perspective, because my study try to decode or try to focus on this relationship between the human and non-human agents, which is of course human beings and technology. So this study further adopts a post-humanist and relational perspective to conceptualize human-technology relations as fundamentally entangled. Harvey's challenges the author challenges traditional distinctions between human and machines through the cyborg metaphor, arguing that identity is increasingly hybrid and technologically mediated. Building on this, we have also Latour's actor network theory that extends this by demonstrating that social reality is produced through networks of both human and non-human actors, including technologies, institutions, and algorithms, all of which possesses forms of agency within relational system. Speaking of post-human theory again, we have Braidotti, who further develops this by decentering the human subject and emphasizing relational, ecological, and technological entanglements that define contemporary subjectivity. In parallel, we're going to move to another aspect of the theoretical framework, which is the one related to digital culture and participation. We have the framework incorporates theories of digital culture and participation to explain how entanglement is reshaped in platformized environments. Here we should lie on the theory of participatory culture of Henry Jenkins, who conceptualized it as a shift from passive media consumptions to active production where users become contributors to to content creation, circulation, and meaning making, also advanced by Papa Charasi, sorry, who introduces the concept of effective publics, emphasizing that digital political expression is increasingly driven by emotional intensities. Moving to the ideas of platform structure, economic, social, and political life through datafication, we have here the theory of platform capitalism coined by Nick 2017, which posit that digital platforms functions as economic infrastructures that extract and monetize data as a central resource. In addition, we have Van Dyck, who expand these by conceptualizing platformizing as a deep infrastructural process that reshapes societal institutions through datafication and algorithmic governance. Finally, we have the most empirical aspect, which is the cultural digital diplomacy aspect. And of course, it's grounded in Joseph Nee's concept of soft power, which defines influence as the ability to shape preferences through attraction rather than coercion, particularly through culture, values, and communication. With that, I hope I haven't succeeded my time. Here are the references of the theories and key theories and ideas that I have just mentioned. And before concluding, I would like to mention something that this study, as I have said, it's an ongoing, and I've already tried to do some research field for it, and it's also because it's also related to my PhD thesis. I've started conducting interviews. I've started working on the surveys related to perspectives of the Moroccan, how they perceive these tools, how they do perceive this interaction between the humans and non-human agencies. I have also tried to reach artificial intelligence experts here in Morocco to know their perspective. It's also the case for the artificial intelligence scholars here in Morocco. And looking forward to have your own perspectives, because I do consider you as researchers and experts in the field. And with that, I would like to say thank you, and that's it.
All right. Thank you. That was another. Say it again.
Was the time correct, or did I miss?
Oh yeah, I just stopped my stop clock at 8 minutes and 25.74 seconds. So you nailed it. Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was dense and a lot to think about. And I have a lot of questions for you. I saw some references in there that I'm excited to follow up on. Okay, so then with that, I'm going to give our audience again a moment to jot down any questions that they might have before we move on to our next speaker. And then I'll give our next speaker a minute to compose himself.
Okay, thank you. I'm hoping that you're able to hear me in a proper fashion. So, hello to everybody. My name is Mihai Burlacu. I'm an associate professor at the Transylvania University of Brașov, Romania. Now, the topic of discussion from tonight, well, it's a bit funny to have someone that is from Dracula land talking to you while you are during the day, and he's talking while he is in the evening. So the irony of that hasn't been lost on me. Now, basically, this is something that I've been doing and I have an interest for this for more than 10 years. I've been teaching in academia for more than 20 years now. So this is not something new. The thing that really sprang my interest back in 2015 was one of Tarkovsky's movies, as I told you, Stalker, which is basically based on a novel by Boris and Arkady Strugatsky. I'm going to also share my screen, but not yet. And my question back then was, wouldn't that also apply to video games? Because in the past, I've been a video gamer with an emphasis on massive multiplayer online role-playing games. I was really interested in anthropology, and about 7 to 8 years ago, I started to teach digital anthropology and also digital world analysis. And Heterotopias tended to spring from my point of view, or better said, sprang all over various video games. For example, there were multiple emplacements in World of Warcraft that did have the characteristics described by Michel Foucault in his Des espaces autres of other spaces from 1967. And my question was, to what extent do the principles of Michel Foucault also apply to various virtual emplacements? More often than not, I tended to find a lot of emplacements in which more than one principle, because in his heterotopology, Michel Foucault has 5 big principles, more than one applied. And another question was whether or not I'm able to identify any type of another principle which was not envisioned by Foucault, because obviously Foucault was not referring to virtual emplacements. But I arrived at that reading a bit of Baudrillard and a bit of other authors. I'm not necessarily a big fan of Foucault, but obviously when trying to develop that, I also needed good epistemological and methodological grounding. And in order to do that, generally, well, in my approach, I tend to be a pragmatist along the lines of Willard van Orman Quine, for example. And in terms of methodology, the one book that I'm using that is similar to what I've seen is Russell Bernard's Qualitative and Quantitative Methods in Anthropology, which is not necessarily a new book, but I saw that it was republished in American academia several times. So basically, I'm going to try now to share my screen as well. The idea that hopefully you'll be able to see is that while trying to do both participant observation but also interviews with some gamers, I reached the point in which I saw that there were places in various games that tended to represent, that tended to better say, to coalesce the rest of the heterotopia within one point. For example, in Tarkovsky's Stalker, you have the room in which all your hopes and dreams may happen. This is actually continuated in games such as Stalker, Stalker 2, Metro, Metro Exodus, in which you have emplacements that are more important than the rest in terms of both distorting time and space, but also offering an acceleration of the narration, because basically when you are within a game, while you explore the game, you also create in a fashion that game, and while you are in a placement that is the nexus or the nucleus or the center of a heterotopia, you also tend to distort the time and space by accelerating the narrative of that game. And this was apparent from my standpoint, for example, in games such as Metro Exodus is a case in point, but also in games which are closer to probably your knowledge, like let's say Fallout 76, which is a massive multiplayer online role-playing game. So that was something that was of interest because, for example, in the case of Fallout 76, you have the possibility to create such emplacements in a temporary fashion when you nuke specific emplacements. So what is distinct from a traditional heterotopia in the case of a virtual heterotopia is the fact that basically you don't truly have space, you don't truly have time. You're more along the lines of what Baudrillard calls a simulacra of the third order, in which basically you lose the representation or the connection to a real emplacement, and you have a representation that exists in itself, wrapped in itself. And from this standpoint, that is why virtual heterotopias are unique juxtapositions of multiple meanings. And these are found first and foremost in video games. Of course, I'm not excluding their existence in and on other platforms, but at this point, I'm interested in their representation in various open world sandbox video games. And out of them, I did concentrate on massive multiplayer online role-playing games. I've been doing this for quite some time, and this allowed me to envision, for example, the fact that while Foucault's concepts focused on physical, real-world spaces, some of his ideas, like the mirror as a heterotopia, can be adapted to virtual heterotopias as well. Now, obviously, when trying to address virtual heterotopias, you need to reevaluate, reassess the existing theoretical frameworks. And there are other writers like Kit Harington, De Kuyter, De Haan, that have written in the past about heterotopias. Closer to 2026, there is another Romanian architect, Smaranda Spunu, who wrote at Springer a book which is called Heterotopia in English, in which she's approaching heterotopias from a cultural heritage standpoint in terms of intangible heritage and heritage in general. And that is another direction that could be of interest, because sometimes, and there are some games in which elements which are inspired from cultural heritage are redefined within digital emplacement. This is basically also the reason why I'm interested in this, because video games, from my standpoint, also can represent intellectual exercises in which you're able to do things that you wouldn't be able to do in reality, or you wouldn't be able to do with the help of a movie or a book. And this is why I was interested in the past in the games, because while you have a quite developed discourse pertaining various books or various movies, a discourse pertaining to various emplacements within academia regarding games has appeared in the last like 15, maybe 17 years. Now here, for example, you have enclosed a blueprint of the so-called Clockwork Mansion from Dishonored 2, another example of a digital heterotopia, which would entail also the contextual representation of the various endeavors of a gamer in order to solve the game. Now, what's interesting is the fact that within Dishonored 2, just like in other games that I've mentioned, you have a connection between space-time and the narrative of the game, which tends to coalesce in one point, in which, for example, in Dishonored 2, you're having the possibility to either kill Kirin Josh or to lobotomize him in the center of his Clockwork Mansion. So basically, my idea here is that in multiple virtual heterotopias, you have nexuses in which, alongside the representation of space and time, you also have a distortion of your narrative, which in a way is also of interest when trying to address every other type of heterotopias. And this is something that is of interest now, to identify whether or not you may find similar things also in real-time heterotopias. Do you have that in a museum? And obviously there are points of interest in museums that tend to act as nexuses for that emplacement. Do you have that in other types of heterotopias? That's a question that I'm trying to delve in my current endeavors, so to speak. Now, here you have a picture of the zone, of the room from the zone, from the famous Stalker from 1979. And basically, one aspect that I try to delve into is whether or not you're able to find places just like this room in various other games. If you look at the games developed in Ukraine, like the Metro series and like the Stalker series, you do have emplacements that are inspired from this. And this is like a leitmotif in the Stalker series. And I'm referring here to the game series, not to the movie, of course. But you can find that in other places. One question that is of interest here is this nucleus also a generator for the existence of a heterotopia? Because in the case of Andrei Tarkovsky's 1979 movie Stalker, obviously the room is like a nucleus, like a nexus for the entire zone. Can we talk about the same thing in games such as Metro Exodus or Fallout 76? Well, in the case of Metro Exodus, you have at least 2 or 3 emplacements in which you can state that those are nexuses for that game, for that emplacement. In the case of Fallout 76, you cannot state that in the same manner. So one element that is of interest for me is, can you and are you, and I'm of course using here the second person in an impersonal manner, are you able to identify such emplacements in open sandbox games, and is that of relevance for example, studying the representation and the inversion of reality in games such as World of Warcraft? To this point, my answer is yes. And in the case of World of Warcraft, actually, I had a few articles in which I addressed the inversion of nature and culture relations in relation to reality as they're represented in World of Warcraft. So this is not something that is my first endeavor in this field. Now, of course, what I did use was in terms of methodology, observation, also content analysis on chat logs, and also I was interested to see whether or not the current theoretical approaches to heterotopias can be used when addressing this idea of nuclearity, of the fact that a heterotopia is like a cell with a nucleus that actually ensures the survival and the symbolic reproduction, so to speak, of that emplacement. Now, as you have seen, I've used more than once the term emplacement, so I think it's proper to also present what I mean by the term emplacement here. By this term, I understand a space, a snippet of space that is loaded with meaning. In the case of a heterotopia, of a virtual heterotopia, that part of space is endowed, is receives multiple meanings, which it entails a juxtaposition of meanings within the same emplacement. Uh, Let me give you an example for this. If you've played, for example, Cyberpunk, you have multiple emplacements in which you have actions that actually are connected from a spatial, temporal, but also from a narrative standpoint. So those places of interest tend to also, if you will, gain a life of their own. Well, that is a potential nucleus for a heterotopia. Not all of them become as such, but some of them tend to delineate such an emplacement. Think, for example, of the maelstrom in World of Warcraft and how it was used in various contexts in order to uh, advance the narrative in this game, or in more modern games, so to speak. In the case of Genshin Impact, how the various areas from Genshin Impact have a connection to a real emplacement, however, are meant as if they represent an idealization of such an emplacement. So that could also represent a point of interest from this standpoint. Now, when I'm talking about the principle of nuclearity, I'm referring basically to this idea that you have a nexus that acts also as the center for the regeneration of a heterotopia, but also as a center for its otherness. And by otherness here, I'm referring to the term alterity. So this is actually right from Foucault's idea that a heterotopia is a space of alterity. That's why he was using, for example, for his now famous essay, des autres espaces, which means of other spaces, instead of saying des espaces autres, for example. So it's interesting that basically what he was writing in the final part of this essay, in which he was talking about a ship as being a reservoir of imagination, can be compared nowadays with the ways in which, and I'm using here plural, the ways in which virtual heterotopias can also represent reservoirs of imagination. So one question that I'm really interested nowadays is if we,
Mihai,
yes,
I'm going to interrupt you really quick. I was really absorbed in taking notes, so I didn't notice you're just about at 15 minutes here, but I see you're at key conclusions. Can you
yeah,
do key conclusions in a couple minutes?
yeah, in 1 minute.
Beautiful.
So
Perfect. Thank you.
what I'm interested in is now to ascertain whether or not we can talk about multiple representations of time within a virtual heterotopia. This is something that was actually of interest for this evening for me, and for this presentation. And also the rest of the ideas are presented here. I don't think it's necessary for me to read them out loud. That would be in a nutshell what I wanted to address today. Thank you for your attention.
That was perfect. That wasn't even a full minute. Thank you so much, Mihai. That was wonderful. I really appreciate, again, as I mentioned to you speaking before the panel, you coming with your level of expertise and joining us today. So this is great. Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
So then, production team, we're moving over to our Q&A section, yes? Wonderful. Okay. What do you need me to do for that? Beautiful. Okay. So from, here's our first one. Oh no, I'm not going to start reading these first. Right. I said I was going to give us a question to kick us off. Okay. So one of the things that I'm going to do as a moderator is I'm going to use my insane godlike power to ask a question I personally am interested in of all three of you. I'm a first year doctoral student, so all of you are like a good bit ahead of me in terms of where you are in your study and your maturity of your research craft. Don't shake your head, you totally are. I was a UX designer previously, so I've done lots of applied research, but I haven't done a lot of the academic stuff. So I loved a lot of the theoretical framing you all were bringing. And I saw a lot of the reflection of the theme for the event of slow care and time and digital relations coming up in your work. But what I'm most interested in is the methodological challenges related to time that each of your projects brought up. So for example, for Fatima, I know that you mentioned that you don't have longitudinal data to be able to see how and whether the effects that you're tracking change over time. And then Ghita, you obviously are directly addressing time, chronopolitics in your work. And Mihai, I think it's really remarkable that this is a concept that you've been able to gather material around for, your 20-year career, but also like the last 10 years of this interest. So I'm curious how time has played a role in your research process and what kind of methodological challenges it posed that were unique that you had to work through with this. Hopefully I've elaborated that question long enough that it gave you a chance to think while I was talking. So who wants to go first with that? Yeah, Mihai, do it.
Okay, so we have in our system some, I know that the term that is preferred nowadays is challenge, but I like to strike the nail on the head and tell you directly that we have some problems in our academia due to the fact that alongside teaching, you have administrative work, which is not paid. And also you have to do research. So basically now I'm teaching two norms. I don't know if that is a proper word, which in our system is bigger than an associate professor from the US. So I'm generally doing that either during my various vacations. For example, last week we had our spring break, as you call it. We had also Easter this week. And also in weekends when I sometimes delve in and I'm having even 8 hours trying to work on this. What I did have, and I'm grateful for that, is a network of colleagues that are interested in this. And also I saw some interest in this among students of mine, particularly in digital media. Some of them are quite interested in this. Now, from this standpoint, it's more difficult nowadays to allot time, for example, for interviews. And also in the European universities now, the ethical, after the Cambridge Analytics scandal, the ethical section is, we have this saying, dead persons, dead people tend to get buried in soil and living are buried in paper, so you have to do file this thick in order to get an acceptance in order to do research on various types of publics. So this is also time consuming, and the bureaucracy behind that is a problem. But aside from that, in terms of observation, in terms of content analysis, from that standpoint, it's like a flow state for me, along the lines of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. So that's very interesting. Now, I saw here another question. How does something like VR chat factor into your ideas about heterotopias? I had a discussion regarding this with another Matthew Adams, who was a next PhD student at Brunel University. And actually, last year he did a presentation regarding VR. Now, in my experience, I use VR in order, for example, to 3D 3D log Roman coins, as in Roman coins, and then study them in virtual. So instead of looking at the microscope or you do it in virtual with your glasses, and that's it. When talking about VR chat, the advantage of VR chat is the fact that you can juxtapose multiple, from a tactical standpoint, for example. Okay, you can juxtapose multiple commands at the same time. And this is along the lines of what Johannes Fabian was talking when he was talking about the instantiation of time. So that is something that could represent not only an intellectual exercise, but also an exercise in terms of how a different presentation of time has an impact on your reactions and on the narrative within a game. Another question is how, and I would think an even better question is how VR chat can help you, because when you're exploring a map, you're not only exploring that map, you're basically creating that map to a certain extent. I don't know whether or not you have you studied the concept of a thick map, which is developed from Clifford Geertz's idea of thick description.
No, but I love Geertz. Tell me more. Say more.
In the interpretation of culture, no doubt you've heard about Clifford Geertz's idea of a thick description in anthropology. And you have, for example, the Balinese cockfight as a classic example of that. Now, some authors, and there are about 2 or 3 books about digital ethnography, have tried to also talk about how the map is not the territory within a game. So obviously, when you are doing a representation of a map within a game, you're basically also you're not representing it from a geographical standpoint, but you are basically representing all the ensemble of relationships between players or gamers, between NPCs, gamers, between NPCs, gamers, and various scripted events. And that entails a different type of mapping that a classical, this is the map of, I don't know, World of Warcraft, have at it. No, it's more than that. And what I'm discussing, for example, and I intend to discuss this next week with my students, is this idea. How are you able to represent a thick map of relations within a game, So this is something, have you studied the Minard's, are you aware of Joseph Minard's representation of Napoleon's campaign into Russia?
I'm personally not, but I'm also going to time check us on this. Let's finish off with this thought if we can, so we can move on to some questions about the other speakers.
Okay, so in a nutshell,
thank you.
It's also regarding the idea of approaching a thick mapping of a game. That would be in a nutshell, but it's more here. So that would be it.
Oh, that was perfect. I'm going to follow up with you on every bit of that. That's really cool. Thank you so much. All right. So Ghita and Fatima, did you have any thoughts on methodological challenges around time? Otherwise, we can switch to Fatima. There were a couple questions specifically for you around methods in AI.
If I can start, because I don't have any questions for me. Honestly, like right now, talking to you, and I have just arrived. I had a meeting. I had to travel for an interview with an ambassador, so I can get the questions, with the answers. And yeah, it is challenging, but I have a purpose. I need the data. I need to do the analysis. So I try to manage my time. I also teach in Fes, and I'm here in Rabat. I have to travel, but luckily I only teach 4 hours per week. Then I have the literature review that needs to be graded and the articles. Honestly, times wise, yes, it is a bit embarrassing, I would call it. But still, I think you'll figure it out. I'm just a second year. I feel like I'm still first year. That's why I was shaking my head and I told you, no, we're no better. Honestly, Liz. But I'm very optimistic, and I do my best. That's basically it, honestly. I hope I was convincing enough.
No, that was very reassuring. That was very reassuring. I'm in a
It
methods
was
class.
realistic. It was a reality check.
Yeah, I'm in a methods class where we had to write up some of our, we had to just write up like a basic report on doing some observations. And even though I've done this for quite a while, not having like the presence of an institution that I'm writing against or for, and just doing it as a researcher, really kind of threw me, especially how long it took to decide what information was not just information someone was expecting from me, but stuff that I thought was meaningful. And it like was just a long process. So thank you guys. All right. Fatima, let's go and ask you some of the questions around methodology first, I think. And not quite methodology, but like some of the logistics. Let's clear those and then close out with some of the other questions near the top here. So does your institution support particular AI services or provide subscriptions for students? Do you know why ChatGPT was the thing that students were using? Is it just because it was the free one or paid one or whatever? Mhm.
Okay, so actually in this context, like the university actually they does not currently provide an official AI service or a subscription for students. So most of them like they rely on these tools independently, and students they like tend to choose ChatGPT mainly because it's very accessible, it's easy to use, you know, about the free version, and it is the most famous AI tool, and even the free version offers enough support for translation, paraphrasing, structuring ideas, and which are the main challenges they face. So as for the differences like between the free and the paid versions, this is not specific focus in my study, so I cannot make precise distinctions based on the data. However, it seems that many students like they primarily use the free version. So in here, like what is most interesting though, it's that even though like without institutional support, ChatGPT has already become integrated into students' writing practices, so which shows how strong its impact is.
That's interesting. Okay. So then let's close this out here because I think we're just about at time with one of the first questions, which I think is really interesting. Considering the emotional impact in this process is incredibly compelling, do you think that the tone assumed by an AI agent could have a positive or negative impact on the user's experience relative to their emotional needs? So the idea of like this tool, like you said, not just being a tool, but something that's really part of the emotional infrastructure of your experience as a student. How do you think that the AI agent sort of like tone plays into that?
Yes, I think that's very important point. Like while my study it's focused more on writing practices, but it's become clear that this integration with ChatGPT is not purely technical. It also has an emotional dimension, and the tone of AI, like which is often neutral, supportive, non-judgmental, and it can actually like reduce the anxiety and make students feel more comfortable like when writing. And at the same time like there could be negative effects as well, especially if students like become too dependent on that kind of feedback, or if it's replaced more critical human interactions, of course. So I would say that the tone of AI does play a role in shaping the user's emotional experience, and this could be in interesting direction for the future research, of course.
Well, cool. Thank you, all three of you. This has been fantastic. Thank you for spending the time and for answering questions.
Thank you, Liz. You have been a fantastic moderator.
I mean,
Thank you very
apart from all
much
the
as
parts
well.
where I screwed
Yes,
up.
you are. Thank you, Liz.
All right.
Just a production note. Tomorrow, panel 3 begins at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, or
I think it's 3 p.m. 3 or 4 p.m. UTC.
3 p.m. UTC. So we'll have presentations from Grant Thomas, Ben Lazar, Matthew Carricker, and Reda Yanturi tomorrow, starting at 10 a.m. Central.
Also, thank you very much. I saw another question, but I don't think we have time for that. From the watch party, do you have any perspective thoughts on analog to virtual heterotopias? For example, now role-playing games, Exemplum, Grazia, Dungeons and Dragons are now played online. Is there a shift in temporality? Then we shift modality. What differences did you notice between heterotopias and single-player games and multiplayer games? Since I don't think we'd have time for that, if you want, I could send a mail to Matthew responding to that. There is a shift at temporality when we shift modality, that's obvious. But this question would entail more further developments, and I don't think you'll have the time for that.